Following reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, an Israeli rally team has participated in a competition on Saudi territory, entering with Israeli passports for the first time in Saudi Arabia's history, suggesting that the reconciliation with Qatar provided an environment that is conducive to Mohammed bin Salman to begin taking gradual steps towards normalizing ties with Israel. And this begs the question as to what extent Qatar accepted reconciliation as part of a request by Kushner and by Netanyahu to help create an environment for facilitating Saudi normalization of ties with Israel. Primarily because it's not a far-fetched scenario that when Netanyahu and Kushner broached the subject with Mohammed bin Salman, he would have replied that it is impossible in the current circumstances, given the microscopic attention Qatar is paying to every action Mohammed bin Salman is taking, and that he would be subsequently lambasted as Qatar's media outlets would have a field day if bin Salman took steps towards normalization of ties with Israel. And therefore it is not far-fetched that Kushner would have taken this into account and requested from the Qataris that they tone down their media coverage, at least in the Arab world, in order to provide an environment in which bin Salman would be able to put his money where his mouth is and actually take steps towards normalization of ties with Israel. And this, of course, is one of the darker dynamics of the reconciliation process, given that Qatar itself is not necessarily averse to normalization of ties with Israel in principle, and indeed was one of the countries that broke ground with regards to normalizing ties with Israel. However, it's important to highlight another dynamic in that the more bin Salman pushes with these reforms, the more that he pushes with the possibility of normalization of ties with Israel, the more that he pushes these show reels on Saudi national television suggesting Islam no longer needs to be the primary dynamic that underpins Saudi identity, but rather there should be a new, uniquely Saudi nationalist identity, which draws parallels, of course, with what Ataturk did when he established the republic and reconstructed Turk identity that ultimately resulted in Turkey's own normalization of ties with Israel. The more bin Salman pushes these reforms, the more he sacrifices Saudi's huge influence over the Muslim world that is underpinned by this image of Saudi as a Muslim leader. And the more bin Salman ironically empowers his rival Turkey as Erdogan increasingly embraces that which bin Salman is abandoning.